So for this week's video solution, we are going to start by solving the following problem. For number 1, it says, given the equation of the transform function g of x, identify the parent function and the transformations. Then graph the function on the coordinate plane below. So we are given g of x is equal to negative x squared plus 4. So what we can do to identify the parent function is we look at this chart here that has a list of several different parent functions, and we can compare our g of x to the functions here. So we do see that there is an x squared. So the parent function for our g of x equation would be y is equal to x squared, which is the quadratic function right here. Now, in order to identify the transformations, we do have to look at any changes that are made to our g of x. So we do see here that we have plus 4 and negative x. Now, in order to identify any transformations, we have to see what exactly is added to this equation. So because the plus 4 is added to the negative x, we know that this is a vertical shift that moves upwards 4 units. But before we can graph, we also have to look at this negative right here. Because there is a negative, we know that there is going to be a reflection across the x-axis. Now, in order to graph this equation, we would move up 4 points, and instead of opening up like our parent function does, it would open downwards because it is reflected. So our g of x equation would look like this. So it is basically this parent function, except instead of at the 0, 0 mark, it moves up 4 and is reflected on the x-axis. Now for our second problem, we have to solve by completing the square. So what we have to start off by doing is we have to have our constant by itself. So we would start by subtracting the negative 18x, the negative 18x to both sides, and then we get x squared minus 18x is equal to 40. Now for this one, we do have to have extra steps. We would have to take this b term here and we would have to half it. So half of negative 18 is negative 9, and then we would square this, which is 81. So we would include this term here, and whatever we do to the left side is done to the right side. And now we can rewrite this as x squared minus 18x plus 81 is equal to 121. Now what we have to do is we have to factor this left side. So we know that 9 times 9 will give us 81, but there is a negative here. So meaning when this number is multiplied, it'll have to be positive on this side, but when it's added here, it would have to be negative. So we would put a negative here because negative 9 times negative 9 gives us positive 81, and then negative 9 plus negative 9 gives us negative 18. So now we can rewrite this as x minus 9 squared is equal to 121. Now what we have to do is we have to continue simplifying. So then we would square root here, and this would cancel out, so we get x minus 9, and then we get plus or minus 11 for this side. Now what we have to do is we just have to simplify for these two equations. So we have x minus 9 minus 11, and then x minus 9 is equal to 11. So now we can start by doing this top equation here. We would add 9 to both sides, and we get x is equal to -2. Now for our second equation, we would also add 9 to both sides, and we get x is equal to 20. So for this problem, we have two solutions, which are 20 and -2. Now for our third problem, it says solve the system either by substitution or elimination/addition. So what I'm going to do is I am going to use addition or elimination. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the constants by themselves. So I'm going to rewrite both equations as -9 is equal to -4x minus 5y. Now for our second equation, it would be -20 is equal to -11x minus 9y. So in order to use elimination, we do have to have either the x or the y be the same number, top and bottom, but have different signs. So in this case, I am going to use the y values and multiply them together so they equal the same number. So in this case, we're going to multiply the top by 9 and the bottom by -5. So now when we distribute, we get -81 is equal to -36x minus 45y. And for the bottom, we would distribute the -5 and we get, that would be +100 is equal to +55 plus 45y. So now that we have the same number for the y's and different signs, we can continue with eliminating the y and just solving for this side here. So -81 plus 100 gives us 19. And then -36 plus 55 also gives us 19. And then we bring down the x, and now we would just solve for x. So we have to get x by itself, and we would divide 19 to both sides, and we get 1 for x. Now, in order to get the y, we have to plug in the x for one of these equations. It doesn't really matter which one. I'm going to go with the one on top, and we get -9 plus 5y is equal to -4. And then we plug in the 1 for the x, and then we would just solve normally. So we have -9 plus 5y is equal to -4. So then we would add the 9, add the 9, and we get 5 is equal to 5y. So y is equal to 1. So that means that our solution is 1, 1. So now what we can do to double check our work is we can plug in our numbers that we got into both equations, and if they both are correct, then we know that we have the correct solution. So what we can do is we have -9 plus 5 times 1, because our y is 1, is equal to -4 times 1, because our x is 1. So now we would just solve normally. So it's -9 plus 5 is equal to -4. -9 plus 5 is -4. So -4 is equal to -4, and that is correct. So it is right for the first one. Now for the second one, we would do the same. We would plug in normally. So -11 times 1 is equal to -20 plus 9 times 1. And you have -11 is equal to -20 plus 9. And here you have -11 is equal to -11. And that is also correct. meaning 1, 1 is a solution.